The guilt gnawed at her, but she reminded herself that she had no other choice. That night, Tina followed Evelyn's instructions. She set up a small room in her house and performed the ritual. The air felt heavy as she chanted the words her friend had taught her. Ye kachika chika, ye kachika chika, ye kachika chika. In the town of Nagusa, Tina was known for her skillful hands as a hairstylist. Despite her talent, business had been slow for months, and her once thriving salon was now eerily quiet. Tina's frustration grew with each passing day as she watched neighboring shops flourishing while her chairs remained empty. She had tried everything she could think of: discounts, new styles, even door-to-door flyers, but nothing worked. The bills kept piling up, and her dream of owning a successful salon seemed to be slipping away. Desperate for a solution, Tina began to wonder if her talent was enough to keep her afloat. One day, during a particular quiet afternoon, she received a call from her friend Evelyn, who lived in a nearby city. Yvonne had started her own salon around the same time as Tina. But unlike Tina, her business was blooming. Curious and envious, Tina decided to pay her a visit, hoping to get some advice on how to turn her situation around. Tina traveled to a neighboring city where Evelyn's salon was bustling with activities. Customers came and went, leaving the salon with smiles on their faces and new trending hairstyles. The sight of the full salon stung Tina's pride, but she pushed the feeling aside, eager to learn how Tina had become so successful. After the last customer left, the two friends sat down for a heart-to-heart. Evelyn seemed almost too calm as she explained her secret. Tina, there is something I do that most people don't know about. I don't just style hair. I take a piece of it for rituals. Tina's eyes widened in shock. Evelyn continued. It's not much, just a few strands here and there, but it works. I perform a small ritual with the hair in a room in my house, and it brings in customers and wealth. Tina was terrified, but Evelyn's success was undeniable. With her own business on the verge of collapse, Tina's desperation began to override her moral compass. Tina returned to Nagusa with Evelyn's secret weighing heavily on her mind. The idea of using her customers' hair for rituals repulsed her, but the thought of losing her salon and her livelihood was even more terrifying. She spent sleepless nights debating whether to follow through with what Evelyn had discussed. Her savings were running dry, and no amount of advertising seemed to attract new clients. Each day, her frustration grew. Eventually, desperation took over. Tina called Evelyn and asked her for guidance on how to perform the ritual. Evelyn, who had been expecting the call, calmly explained the steps. It's simple, she said. Just make sure no one sees you take the hair. You can hide it easily. And then at night, perform the ritual in a secluded place in your home. Tina agreed, though her heart pounded in fear. She convinced herself that this was the only way to save her business. The next day, a few customers trickled into Tina's salon. As she styled their hair, her hands shook slightly. When no one was looking, she discreetly snipped off a few strands and placed them in a small pouch. The guilt gnawed at her, but she reminded herself that she had no other choice. That night, Tina followed Evelyn's instructions. She set up a small room in her house and performed the ritual. The air felt heavy as she chanted the words her friend had taught her. Ye kachika chika, ye kachika chika, ye kachika chika. She wasn't sure if it would work, but at this point she was willing to try anything. The next day, Tina was surprised to see her salon busier than usual. Word seemed to spread, and the customers started pouring in. Business had finally picked up. Within weeks, Tina's salon was thriving. Clients who had never set foot in her shop before were now regulars. Tina couldn't believe the transformation. Her once empty chairs were now constantly occupied. She was making more money than she ever had before, and for the first time in months, she felt secure. But there was a cost. Tina noticed that some of her regular customers stopped returning. A few had fallen sick, others had suffered accidents, and some had even lost loved ones. She tried to push the guilt away, convincing herself that these were just coincidences. After all, she was finally achieving the success she had always dreamt of. However, deep down, Tina knew that something was wrong. Tina decided to call Evelyn to share her newfound success. "It's working," she said. Her voice filled with excitement. "I have never seen my shop so busy." Evelyn, however, wasn't so enthusiastic. "I'm glad it's working for you, but be careful, Tina. There is a balance to these things. The more you take, the more consequences there might be. You have to control it." Tina brushed off her friend's warning, too caught up in her success to worry about the potential risk. She had finally escaped the crushing weight of her financial problems, and she wasn't about to give that up. As Tina's wealth grew, so did the strange occurrences around her. More and more clients began to suffer misfortunes. Some fell gravely ill, others lost their jobs, and accidents became frighteningly common. One of her longtime clients, a young woman named Nara, was involved in a serious crash accident shortly after leaving Tina's salon. The guilt that Tina had been suppressing began to rise to the surface. She couldn't imagine the fact that her success seemed to be coming at the expense of her customers. But every time she considered stopping, she remembered her struggling business, and the fear of losing everything returned. One day, a mother came in with a little boy who needed a haircut for school. Tina hesitated, but in the end, she did as she always did, snipping off a few extra strands of hair and storing them for ritual later that night. The next day, she heard devastating news. The boy had fallen gravely ill, and the doctors couldn't explain what was wrong with him. Tina's heart sank. She had crossed a line, and now an innocent child was paying the price for her greed. The guilt was almost unbearable, but the riches that kept coming her way dulled the sharp edge of her conscience. Nagusa was a small town, and words of strange illnesses and accidents began to spread quickly. People started whispering about a curse or a bad omen in the air. The once thriving town was now a place of fear, and many residents were too frightened to leave their homes. Despite the growing fear, Tina's business continued to prosper, but with every new customer, her anxiety grew. She knew that the people were beginning to suspect something unnatural was happening, and it wouldn't be long before someone connects the dots. A group of concerned citizens came together to investigate the strange occurrences in Nagusa. They visited the homes of the sick and injured, trying to find any common threads between them. It wasn't long before they realized that nearly all of the victims had visited Tina's salon shortly before their misfortunes began. The group began to gather evidence, and soon, rumors spread that Tina's salon was cursed. People whispered that something dark was happening there, and fewer customers walked through her doors. Tina could feel the walls closing in around her. Her once busy salon was now empty again, and the wealth that had flowed so freely seemed to have dried up overnight. She was terrified, both of being caught and losing everything she had worked for. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that Evelyn had been right. There was a balance to these things, and Tina had upset it. Now she was paying the price. Desperate for answers, Tina decided to confront Evelyn. She traveled to the neighboring city, only to find that Evelyn's salon was closed and her house was locked up. When she finally tracked down her friend, Evelyn seemed distant and cold. "I warned you, Tina," Evelyn said. "You took too much. Now the balance is shifting, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." Tina begged for help, but Evelyn refused. "I can't help you. You have to deal with the consequences of your actions." As the town's suspicions of Tina grew, someone broke into her house and discovered the small secret room where she performed the rituals. Word spread quickly, and the town was terrified by what they found. The strands of hair, the strange symbols on the walls, it all pointed to something dark and unnatural. The town leaders called for an investigation, and it wasn't long before the authorities became involved. Tina knew that it was only a matter of time before they came for her. Nagusa was in chaos. People were terrified to leave their homes, and many were calling for Tina's arrest. Some demanded that she be punished for the deaths and illnesses that had plagued the town, while others insisted that she be driven out of Nagusa forever. Tina's world was crumbling around her, and she had no idea what to do. The wealth and success that had seemed so important just weeks ago felt meaningless in the face of the town's anger and fear. In a desperate attempt to fix the situation, Tina decided to perform one last ritual. She believed that if she could balance the scales, she would undo the damage she had caused. She gathered the last of the hair she had collected and locked herself in the ritual room, praying for a way out. Aga shabara shabara, aga shabara shabara, aga shabara shabara. The air in the room grew thick, and a strange oppressive energy filled the space, but instead of bringing peace, the ritual seemed to make everything worse. Tina felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over her, and she realized too late that there was no way to fix what she had done. The next morning, the authorities arrived at Tina's house with a warrant for her arrest. She was taken into custody, and the town people gathered to watch as she was led away in handcuffs. Many were relieved, believing that the source of the town's misfortune had finally been dealt with. As Tina sat in her cell, she thought about everything that had happened. She traded her morals for wealth, and now she was paying the ultimate price. The end. Thank you guys for watching. Please support this small channel by hitting the subscribe button, like this video, and also leave a comment in the comment section below. Thank you so much. Until next time.